Well, shalom. This is Daniel again from Israel, and I wanted to give you an update because there's some new developments that have taken place in the last 24 hours. Excuse me. But before that, in case you are watching this and didn't see the previous video that I posted a few days ago, let me just recap things and bring us up to speed and then tell you what's new. In Israel, the election process is quite different than the U.S. The U.S., they end up picking the leader of the Democratic Party, the leader of the Republican Party, and they have an election in November. Usually the results are known that evening or at worst the next day, unless there's a situation like with Al Gore and Bush back in 2000 or what have you. But 99 times out of 100, you know who the winner is that evening. In Israel, it's entirely different. We have a parliamentary democracy here. Instead of two main parties, we have, at the last count, there are 31 parties. 31. And in Israel, you don't vote for an individual candidate, you vote for a party. Now, it turns out that Benjamin Netanyahu is the leader of the Likud party. So if you want to vote for Netanyahu, you're going to vote for the Likud party. When you go into the booth to vote, you have tabs for parties, not individuals, parties. So what has to happen in Israel is the Knesset is our version of the Congress. The Knesset is 120 seats. You have to have 61 seats minimum in order to control the Knesset. Not any party in the history of modern Israel has ever had 61 seats on its own. So what has to happen is the party with the most votes, or which translates into seats, the one with the most goes and forms a coalition with other smaller parties of similar ilk. In this most recent election, two parties emerged as the leading ones. There was no clear winner. So the president of the country is tasked normally with selecting the leader of the party that got the most votes to go form a coalition. In most cases, it's pretty clear-cut who that's going to be. In this case, because the final count of the election showed the blue and white party led by Benny Gantz, former IDF commander-in-chief, he got 33 seats, and the Likud party, led by Netanyahu, got an ultimate total of 32. Originally it was 31, but one of the smaller parties actually forfeited their seat, and so Likud inherited that. So 33 for blue and white, 32 for Likud. Obviously, neither one of them are close to 61, which is what's needed to control the 120-seat Knesset. So discussions have been going on to figure out what is the next step forward. And no doubt they were talking about a possible unity government. Unity government would be combining blue and white and Likud into one government, and then trying to figure out who the prime minister would be. Well, that didn't work, probably for a number of different reasons, not the least of which was Benny Gantz said, I'm not going to let Benjamin Netanyahu be prime minister. And Netanyahu said, I'm not going to let Benny Gantz be prime minister. So it looks like the unity idea collapsed, which left President Rivlin with the task, rather unpleasant task, given how close the two parties were to each other, of selecting one of those two leaders to try to form a coalition. Wednesday night here in Israel, he chose Benjamin Netanyahu to form a coalition. Now, you're probably asking yourself, does that mean Netanyahu won the election? No, it doesn't. What it means is that the president has decided that the block of seats in the Knesset, that is Netanyahu's party and other smaller conservative parties, the block that he has put together is a stronger block than the block that Benny Gantz could put together with other liberal parties. So, but still, no clear majority. The consensus is that if Netanyahu put together all the conservative parties that are willing to stand behind him at the moment, the most seats he would have is 55. Best guess on Gantz's side is if he put all the liberal parties together, the most he would have is 54. However, that includes 10 MKs, or seats, if you will, from the Arab Joint List. And you know that they're not going to vote for pro-Israel stuff. So in reality, he actually has 44 instead of 54 confirmed seats. Nowhere near needed to form a majority of the 120-seat Knesset. So, President Rivlin said last night, Mr. Netanyahu, I'm giving you the opportunity to try to form a coalition. Consensus is it's not going to happen. Now, this is all in the natural. Miracles, this is the land of miracles. This is Israel. This is the only place in the entire world that man doesn't own. God owns it. All right? And we have to believe that God is watching and that God is in control and God already knows what the outcome is going to be. And what's the outcome? We don't know yet, but it could very well be that Netanyahu, while he's been given 28 days, which is the procedure to form a coalition, he might fail, which he did last time this happened. Don't forget, there was elections not that long ago, several months ago. He could only come up with 60 seats, not a majority. So there was a collapse, and that's why we're here again. And that's why they're having new elections. That could happen all over again. He may spend the next 28 days trying to form a coalition and not succeed. Then President Rivlin will turn to Benny Gantz and say, okay, now it's your turn to try to form a coalition. And he'll give it a try, and he may not succeed. So what happens? Well, there's lots of variables. One, Avigdor Lieberman, who is the leader of the Israel Beitenu party, has refused to commit to any coalition, whether it's led by Netanyahu or whether it's led by Benny Gantz. We don't know what he may do. He may sit out the whole thing. He may be trying to position himself, if everything continues to fail, to see if he ends up being prime minister. Who knows what the guy's thinking is, okay? Only he knows. But he's ultra-secular and ultra-conservative. So it bodes well for those of us who want a strong Jewish Israel, but not those of us who believe in God, all right? So he is the kingmaker, as they say. Who knows what he's going to do? Let's say Netanyahu fails, cannot form a 61-seat majority. President Rivlin then turns to Benny Gantz and said, it's your turn. You try to form a majority. And he can't do it either. What happens? They try again. There'll be new elections yet again. They'll do the whole process all over again, and this could keep repeating itself again and again and again until somebody comes up with a 61-seat minimum coalition. Now, the good news is that while that may continue to happen, and it's frustrating, Netanyahu remains prime minister the whole time. He will remain prime minister until such time that a new one is actually chosen. That hasn't happened yet. A couple other things to keep in mind. One, Benjamin Netanyahu has been under threat of criminal indictment for bribery and corruption charges for quite some time. Charges have not been formally levied. The Attorney General is supposed to make that decision anytime, and he could very well formally charge Netanyahu with criminal activity. If that's the case, it could be that Netanyahu resigns because enough people will rise up and say, we're not going to vote for a guy who's under criminal indictment. On the other hand, he could stick to his guns, no pun intended, and remain active and try to secure the prime ministership again. We don't know. But a lot depends on what the Attorney General decides to do, and we should know that very shortly. The other scenario is prophecy. There is an ancient Jewish prophecy, and I believe the late Rabbi Kaduri, who was a Messianic Jew, is the one who, I don't know if he formulated it or he actually promoted it, but there is a prophecy that if the government or the gatekeepers of Israel fail at least 3 successive times, that opens the door for Gog and Magog. Now, this is the 3rd time that we're involved in right now. If there is a failure to bring about a minimum number of Knesset members to form a ruling coalition, then that means the government will have failed for the 3rd time. We don't know, but it is a prophecy that has been out there for some time. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. But in the meantime, that's the story. Wheels are spinning. All kinds of pundits are putting out their stuff. And I would venture to guess most of you living in the West are probably getting stuff which is not really accurate. Most of the Western media that I have seen and I've heard other people talk about, they're all saying the end of the road for Netanyahu. He's finished. He's blah, blah, blah. They hate him like most of the Democrats in the U.S. hate Trump. It's that kind of thing. And the liberal media hates Trump. Netanyahu is dealing with the same situation. So I'm trying to give you what I know, which is straight from here, ground zero, and I'll do what I can to keep you as informed as possible. So that's it for now. Blessings from Israel.